The harpsichord and the piano might look similar, but they're really not very much alike. They both have keyboards, they have strings, they have soundboards, but that's really just about all they have in common. Let's take a look. The piano is older than the harpsichord. It was probably invented in the 15th century, whereas the piano was invented in the early 18th century. But the harpsichord was not an earlier version of the piano. The piano and the harpsichord look very similar because early pianos were made in harpsichord cases. They came out of the idea of the harpsichord. But there's one major difference between the harpsichord and the piano, and that's how the instrument works, how it makes sound. On a harpsichord, the keys act as long levers that lift what are called jacks, which each have tiny plectra in them, which are made of plastic or originally bird quill, and that plectrum plucks the string as it moves, as the key presses down and the lever moves upwards. On a piano, the action is actually way more complex. There are over 100 different parts between every key and every set of strings. So the piano is actually so complex in its action, I can't go into details here, but I'll put a link in the description below to a great video that shows you the action and detail of how the piano works. The thing that you should know about the piano, though, the important thing, is that the way it makes sound is through little hammers that hit the strings. So the harpsichord is plucked, the strings are plucked, kind of like a guitar, but on a piano, the strings are hit with hammers. The differences in action between the harpsichord and the piano create differences in sound, they create a difference in touch, and that touch, in turn, means that the instruments require very different playing techniques. The harpsichord requires total body relaxation and minimal movement, whereas the piano requires arm weight and body weight in addition to relaxation. Here's a very short demonstration of what the harpsichord sounds like. Since the harpsichord makes sound by having the strings be plucked, a lot of people talk about it as an instrument that doesn't have any dynamics, at least not in the way that the piano does. The piano has a very large dynamic range. But to say that the harpsichord doesn't have any dynamics is not really true. The way that you touch the keys on a harpsichord can create a small range of dynamics and dynamic colors that can be different based on how relaxed you are and how into the key you are before it plays and before the string plucks. If I play the harpsichord like this, I get a loud, kind of sharp sound. But if I keep my hands on the keys and release my weight, playing in a way that's called on the string, then the sound has a minimally softer dynamic, but also a greater warmth of tone. What the harpsichord lacks in dynamic range, it makes up for in touch sensitivity. On the harpsichord, you can actually feel the pluck point, or the point where the plectra touches the string before it plays it. This allows you to have a lot of control over the attack and the bloom of the sound in a way that you're just not able to on the piano. Now, not all harpsichords are the same. They differ from instrument to instrument and originally from country to country in different builders in different places. Some have 2 manuals, some have 1 manual like this. This is actually called a virginal harpsichord, where the strings run perpendicular to the keyboard instead of parallel with it. There are also spinet harpsichords, which have the strings at a 30-degree angle, often called a bent-side spinet. And there were different countries. The different countries had different building traditions. So there were the Flemish, which were the early masters of the instrument. There were the French, who often built large instruments with rich sounds and deep, rich bass notes. Italian instruments were often strung in brass and were very bright sounding and strident. And German harpsichords were often kind of a combination of French and Italian harpsichords, where they had kind of a crispy lower end, but they also had a singing tone up higher. And English harpsichords were often kind of like German harpsichords. Harpsichords could also have different stops, like kind of like on an organ. So they could have strings an octave higher, called a 4-foot stop. They could also have a special stop. I don't have it on this instrument, but called a lute stop or a buff stop, where leather is moved to touch the strings, and that creates, or was supposed to create, something that sounds kind of like a lute, which is a plucked instrument from the Baroque and Renaissance periods, kind of related to the guitar. So all those things could be on harpsichords, and they were very different, or could be very different from each other. Like harpsichords, early pianos were also very different from each other. They weren't standardized, and they could vary widely, even in the number of keys they had, but definitely in the tone colors and the different types of sounds that were prized by different makers. The piano changed a lot over time, of course. It got more keys as music changed. It got metal bracing in the instrument as there became lower bass notes with larger strings that put more tension on the frame, and it gained foot pedals instead of knee pedals, like on the original instruments. The piano was in fact not standardized. The modern piano we think of today didn't come into being and be so unified until the end of the 19th century. So the piano changed a lot from the time of its invention until the time that it got to where we are now. So now you can see that the harpsichord really is a very different instrument than the piano. So what else do you want to know about the harpsichord? Let me know, leave me a comment below, tell me what you want to know. And if you like this video, please hit the like button and then hit subscribe. And don't forget to hit that little bell so that you can get notified every time I put up a new video, which will be every Tuesday. Thanks so much for watching.